Welcome to another edition of Backstage Pass, powered by the Sports Guys Podcast, with your host, Brandon Morrell.
Hey, football fans, this is Greg Tepper, editor-in-chief of Dave Campbell's Texas Football, and you are listening to the home of the Hampshire Finette Longhorns right here with my guy, Brandon Morrell, at the sportsguyspodcast.com.
And we're live out here in front of Guitar Center, Beaumont, Texas, one of our proud sponsors, 2025 Hampshire Finette Football. It's Longhorn Radio, the sportsguyspodcast.com, award nominated. And, of course, another season is upon us here. And, of course, in this pregame show, our hype show, kickoff show for the 2025 season, presented by Rockin' A Cafe, JK Subaru, Chandler Marie Music, Morrell Law Firm, of course, Casey Beck Music, Barkley Music and Media, Morrell Chiropractic, and, of course, out there, Raising Cane's of Southeast Texas. Pleased to welcome in one of my buddies. Always, you know, football season's around when he joins us, Greg Tepper, Dave Campbell's Football Magazine. What's going on, Greg?
It is another season upon us. The off season, I think, kind of flew by this year, which is, I think, good and bad because on the plus side, there's more football. But for me, that just means there's a lot of work. I got 17 weeks of grinding here all the way until Christmas, but it's the good kind of work. So pleased to be here.
Appreciate you being here, no doubt. Hey, let's get right to it. Tough district last year, no doubt. I mean, Hampshire Finette, one of the toughest ones in the state there. You've got West Orange Stark. Everybody looks ahead to that matchup. But, you know, one of those tough non-district schedules they played last year. We got to see it. Like I said, full throttle right there. 5-0 in district, first outright district title since the 90s. Coach Wagner, one of the best head coaches in Southeast Texas. Give me some of those expectations right now with knowing you're going to have Tarkington and Shepherd and West Orange Stark and Jasper. And Greg, it's always a tough district there, but the Horns will be young. But again, I think that expertise kind of playing off from last year, losing a lot of seniors, it's going to fire up this underclassmen, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think when you take a look at this team, first of all, it's going to be easy to look at what changed, and you know, you lose a fair amount of guys, 14 starters from a team that was a 10-win team and a district champion a year ago, and you look at, you know, some of the names they lost. Obviously, guys like Ty Bryson, who was so good for them, Braxton Starnes, who I thought was a real star on that defense, Chris Augustine. You don't just replace those guys. It's going to be easy to look at that, but I also think it's important to see what the Longhorns still have, which is, as you mentioned, one of the best coaches in Southeast Texas there, and Mark Wagner, a guy who's forgotten more football than I'll ever know, and a guy who always seems to squeeze every last drop out of every team that he has. And then you look at some of the playmakers they've got coming back. I think Pierce Pirtle is a name that is going to become a real household name, I think, at least in Southeast Texas and maybe statewide. This is one of those versatile guys who can do a little bit of everything. I think he is ready for his close-up. I love some of the guys they've got up front, including big Landon Batiste. I mean, look, 6'4", 350. You can't teach that. They've got some size. I think Malachi Adams, their corner, has an opportunity to really have a breakout year as well. Look, you're not kidding. It's a tough district. There are going to be good teams left out of the playoffs in this district. You know, that's Silsbee, West Orange Stark, Jasper. I feel like I think Shepherd is on the rise in a real way. I thought they took some nice strides. I know Tarkington is still trying to get their feet underneath them, but I think the arrow is pointing up for that program. So it's a tough district, but at the same time, it is one of those districts where you feel like if you can come out on top, you've got a real chance to play in December because you're battle tested, because you had to go through the wars to get to that point. So I think for Hampshire Finette, yes, I think there is some growing to do. And it would not be a surprise if early in the season they took some lumps, especially with their non-district schedule. However, this is one of those teams that like wake me up in week 8. I want to see what this team looks like in week 8 because Mark Wagner coach programs tend to get better as the season goes on, and I am interested to see what they look like then. It may be slow going in the early part because there are some young pieces, but I think that the ceiling for this team, especially with an undefeated JV team kind of there as reinforcements, I think the ceiling is pretty high for this Longhorns ball club.
Let's talk about the Beaumont schools here, too. Of course, Beaumont Westbrook, and you look at Beaumont United, too, and some coaching changes over the last few years. But you mentioned size and, of course, weight. You can't really teach that when it comes to offensive linemen. Big up front, the Westbrook Bruins trying to put, years past behind them. I know Chuck Langston looking to take another step forward there with some young kids. Talk about which Beaumont school you expect to have kind of that biggest change this year and more output on the field for a better season.
Yeah, I think you start with Westbrook, kind of the I guess the flagship program there in Beaumont, and this is a team that it does feel like 2018 is a long time ago, but I think Chuck Langston there, kind of entering his 5th season there, these guys are used to him, and I think that there's reason to really like what this team has coming back. Specifically, you mentioned up front guys like Xavier Stewart, and I think that they're going to Devin Neighbors as well, and then you add in what I think is going to be one of the better defensive kind of back sevens in the Southeast Texas. Chris Landry, Nick Stuberfield rather, Brian Briscoe. I think this team has got some real upside here. Part of the issue I think is a similar issue to what we were talking about with Hampshire, which is it's tough district, right? They're going to have to get through Port Arthur Memorial. They're going to have to get through Lufkin, right? Galveston Ball didn't forget how to play football, even though they've got obviously a lot of change go there. I'm really high on Barbers Hill, but I do think that they've got an opportunity to get into that playoffs if things kind of break right there for Westbrook. United's interesting because this is obviously a program that's still trying to get their legs underneath them. They turned to Drenard Williams, to the former Austin LBJ assistant, and a guy who I think the thing that you can say about him is that he can tell his kids sincerely, hey, I am here for the long haul. I am here to build this program. He's a Beaumont guy. He understands what it takes, what winning football looks like in that part of the world. He has an interesting group of squads. I think their secondary may be good, and I want to see how this Raphael Deschodel, their quarterback, kind of takes the next step. I think it might be a slow build there for United, but I think they've got the right guy there in Coach Williams, and I'm interested to see if they can just take that step there. I think it may be they could be one of those teams that kind of surprises some people if things break right.
You're not going to talk about the P&G Indians, of course. I mean, 12-2 last year, number 9 to start the season for you guys. Dave Campbell's magazine for those state rankings. They're 12-2 last year. The state quarterfinals open the season against Klein Oak there too, and always high expectations of what he's done over the last 3-4 years since he's been here. Really set the tone for the program, and I think if my math is correct, Greg, 46-8 over his 3 seasons now at P&G. You look at that even last year too. Of course, you talk about South Oak Cliff being around Brenham, Argyle, some of those top-ranked teams. Richmond, Randall, state champions last year too. Of course, Texarkana, Texas High, Iowa Colony, Fort Bend Marshall. Talk about P&G and the forecast for this year.
Yeah, P&G is going to be really unique this year because I think that this is a program that's going to be, or this is a team that's going to look very I don't want to say dissimilar, but very different from what they have been the past couple of years, and really the past 3 years when they've gone state runner-up, state champion, and then regional finalist the past 3 years. They're going to be different because, if anything, the one thing you can say for the first time in Jeff Joseph's career there is that I think their best weapon is their quarterback in Connor Bailey. And this is a guy who's a 3-year starter now. He's 25-2 as a starter. I mean, I sometimes a kid's just a winner. And Connor Bailey's a winner, and he's a guy who can go out there and lead this offense, and he'll need to, right? Because they do have a fair number of pieces to replace. They've got to find a bell cow running back. They think that it's Tyson Henry. We know they're going to be good up front with Aaron Wolford leading the way, a guy who is one of the best offensive tackles, I think, in the state of Texas. This is going to be really interesting to see because they have to find a lot of those skill guys kind of around them. They've got the quarterback, and they've got the offensive line. But what do they have? And really, I think they're actually going to be pretty good on in the front seven. My questions are going to be on the secondary and in the out wide offensively. And on the secondary, I trust Jeff Joseph. I just think he's one of the brightest young defensive minds in Texas high school football. I trust him to figure it out. What I want to see is what kind of weaponry develops around Connor Bailey that gives them that extra push, because I think that's ultimately where it's going to be told. They don't get a whole lot of breaks here. They're in a tough district, and in particular, I think they're in an absolutely brutal region. They're in Region 2, where you're dealing with you're dealing with Huntsville, who I think is going to be really, really good. South Oak Cliff. You mentioned Texas High. Very high on teams like Marshall, Midlothian Heritage. This is it's a bruising path, but we know the expectations there in P&G, and if they can blossom, especially when the skill position spots, then I think the Indians have an opportunity to make some noise.
Got to talk about this, of course, the West Orange Stark Mustangs, and one of the game of the week down here for Channel 12. Stangs going up against, again, the Newton Eagles. Newton Eagles always sit there and they don't rebuild; they just reload. Looking back at it too as well, but Newton, one of the top ranked teams in the state, right there. West Orange Stark. Does it get any better for a Friday night in Southeast Texas?
No, this is the game of the week in Southeast Texas, and this is one of the games of the week I think in the state. I mean, this is box office stuff, and there's ample reason to believe that both these teams can really have a big year, be playing in December. You know, you start with West Orange Stark. The Hiawatha Hickman, it took a minute, and I know that there was some. I know that there were people who were. It didn't go as quickly as they wanted it to, but I think Hiawatha Hickman has officially arrived there at West Orange Stark as far as head coach is concerned, and this year could be their real breakout year. I love what they have in Kelby Jefferson, their running back, a little water bug back there, but an absolute just superstar, I think, back there. And I think they're going to be hard hitting in that West Orange Stark kind of, that defense with Antarian Fontenot leading the way, Jonathan Johnson. They're going to hit, they're going to strike you. For Newton, obviously they're punching up a classification from 3A up to 4A, but they're a team that I think is on that short list of teams that can really contend as far as a state championship is concerned in 3A Division 2. This is a Newton team that feels ready for prime time. They've got a dude back there in Kendra Porter, a 2,200-yard rusher a year ago. They've got the guy they feel like is the quarterback in Deldrick Samuel. They got Braylon Patterson. They're loaded. They're loaded, absolutely, with the skill position talent that we have come to expect from Newton. And I think it will be a really interesting first test out of the gate for Newton to go on the road to take on a tough 4A, state-ranked 4A team and just kind of throw haymakers at them. I am very interested to see how this shakes out. I'm going to be keeping a close eye on this game because I think that we will learn a lot about two of the premier contenders in the Golden Triangle in the opening night of the season.
Got to ask you about the Bridge City Cardinals. A huge turnaround last year. Of course, they opened their season with Buna coming up here for week 1, 2. And then, of course, that tough district right there, too, because you just never know which way it's going to go. I mean, at Livingston, you got to play Little Cypress. You got Liberty. You got Hargrave. You just got a very tough district there for the Bridge City Cardinals. But, Coach Smalley came over from Orangefield. Greg has done a great job kind of being really just the leader of that program. He built some great teams at Orangefield for a lot of years. Talk about just the expectations now that they have turned it around and kind of gone to the next level now with the Bridge City Cardinals and expectations for 2025.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that Coach Smalley has raised the bar there at Bridge City. And I know it was just 1 year, right? But when you consider the fact that they won as many games in 2024 as they did in the previous 3 seasons combined before his arrival, you got to sit up and pay attention. And I think it's one of the real remarkable turnaround stories that he has manufactured there. And by the way, I don't think they're going away. I mean, they bring back 15 starters, and yes, they got to find a new quarterback. Hutch Bearden, I thought, was so good for them, but guys like Ashton Summerall, their running back, is back. Abraham Manjulia, their wide receiver, I think is a breakout star. I think their defense, which brings back 9 starters defensively, could really take that step. This is a Bridge City team that I think is ready for their close-up, and I think is ready to kind of break through into the mainstream. I think last year they were a fun story, and this year I think they're a force to be reckoned with, and especially. Look, you take a look at that district. You mentioned District 10 4A Division 2, and this is, or 4A Division 1 rather. And this is, I think, one of the more underrated districts, I think, in Texas, because, you've got, there's not a lot of brand names as far as statewide brand names are concerned. But then when you start digging in, you're like, okay, well, Huffman Hargrave was pretty darn good last year. Yep. Little Cypress Mauriceville, certainly on the up and up, especially with a district championship under their belt. I thought Viter really got better as the season went on last year. They bring back 8 starters defensively. I'm very high on Lumberton. I think Hardin Jefferson may be the real sleeper in this district. And then I also think, for Livingston and Liberty, I think the arrow is pointing up. This is a deep and I think very dangerous district that I think it may get overshadowed because, look, they're matched up in bi-district matchup with District 9. And District 9, you got East Texas teams, Kilgore, Chapel Hill, Lindale, Pine Tree, right? And they, District 10 took it on the chin last year. I think District 10 has an opportunity this year to kind of to turn that around a little bit and get some of those playoff wins. And once you get past that first round of the playoffs, things do kind of open up. It's a tough draw in by district, But then you take a look at District 11 and District 12, and it starts to get a little bit more manageable. So I think for all those teams in District 10, including Bridge City, if you can just get over that first round hump against a Chapel Hill or against, potentially don't finish fourth. You don't want to see Kilgore in the first round. But if you do that, you got an opportunity to make some noise. And I'm very intrigued. I'll be watching that playoff race very closely because obviously going up against District 9, you want to finish as high as possible. And if Bridge City can grab one of those top 2 spots, I think they got an opportunity to really turn some heads.
For those folks, Greg, who've never seen the Mid-County Madness rivalry, we talked about how good P&G is, but I think this is also a key year for Scott Rich and the Nederland Bulldogs. Good weapons coming back to on both sides of the ball there too at the same time. Not the type of season I know they wanted to finish last year, but talk about just that Mid-County Madness game and how everybody can kind of look at that and say, well, it's not week 1. It's not till, week 8 or week 9, but it almost feels like that rivalry's talked about for so many different years and years, the oldest in the state of Texas and maybe the oldest nationwide looking back. But the Dogs have something to prove this year for Nederland, right?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Obviously they kind of, after that P&G win, which was historic for a number of reasons, they did kind of fall off. Now they ran into 3 really good teams: Huntsville, Montgomery, and then Texas High, and they lost those games close. I think they can look at that and say we were close last year, and now we have to get over the hump. It's also important to remember that win over P&G on the road by 3 points is pretty remarkable for a couple of reasons. One, pretty big upset. Anytime you beat P&G, you feel pretty good about it. And 2, it was the first time anyone had ever beaten Jeff Joseph in a 1-score game. He had been undefeated in 1-score games. It was something like 12-0 or 13-0 at that point in 1-score games, which is crazy to think about. But Nederland kind of cracked the code. And I think that Scott Rich feels like, you know what? This is sustainable. Now, look, there is reloading to do, plain and simple. When you only bring back 7 starters, you are going to have to find some playmakers in a hurry. And I think they're going to need to dig into that JV to find some of those guys to kind of fill the holes. I think they're going to be strong defensively, but I am interested to see what they look like, especially offensively. Losing guys like Hubert Thomas, who is so important to them, KJ Tizano, their number 1 receiver. Can they find the weaponry around them to make it stand up? That's the real question. Do they have that youth movement in the wings to kind of make up for some of the losses due to graduation? Because look, they graduated 33 lettermen. That is a lot of guys, and that's a lot of holes to fill for a roster. So I think Nederland, the expectations may be a little tempered simply because of that. But I also think that Scott Rich is going to have his boys ready to roll, not just for P&G, but also for what's going to be obviously a very difficult district with Huntsville, Montgomery, and teams like Dayton.
The small schools, Greg, here in Southeast Texas, again, join here, Greg Tepper, Dave Campbell's Bible football magazine out there. I call it the Bible. Make sure you guys get your copy or visit Dave Campbell's .com here on Longhorn Radio here again, the home of the Hampshire Finette Longhorns, the Sports Guys podcast.com too. The small schools, Southeast Texas, a lot of them too can make some big jumps this year. Which kind of top 2 or 3 are you looking at for some of the small schools in Southeast Texas here to take the next step?
I look at a team like Woodville, obviously a team that played for a state championship a year ago, a team that was a remarkable run to a state championship, one of the most remarkable runs we've seen in quite some time. They lose a lot of star power, and so can they kind of reload on the fly? I think that is going to be a real question for them. One of the teams in the small school ranks that I've got my eye on this year is Deweyville. I'm very intrigued by what Deweyville's got cooking this year. It feels like a program that is ready for that breakthrough. They've kind of come close a couple of times, but now you take a look at what they've got down there in the 2A ranks. They've got, I think, enough coming back to really make some noise. This is a team that won the district championship last year. They bring back 14 starters from a team that went into the playoffs, took a first round loss to Mount Enterprise. I know that sticks in their craw, but I think that's ultimately kind of a learning experience for them. This is a program that I think is on the rise in a big way. You talk about not many programs have 27 wins in the last 3 years. It's pretty darn good what Brandon Prowse has been able to do. And I'm interested to see what Elijah Milton does for his senior. He was the offensive MVP of the district last year. He's not coming off the field. And so I think obviously depth is going to be a huge question for them. Whenever you're only going to have something along the lines of 24 varsity players, you need to make sure you stay healthy. But if they do, then I think look at potentially a team that can continue that kind of upward trend there in Deweyville. They look like a team to keep it on. The only other team that I would mention down there, kind of that Golden Triangle area in the small school ranks, would be Corrigan Camden. I'm intrigued by what the Bulldogs have coming back. This is a Corrigan Camden team that I think the record last year was a little deceiving. They went just 5-6, but they were very, very young. They bring back 16 starters from a year ago. They feel like they've got good cohesion coming back, and they've got some playmakers on that team. I also think that the best may be yet to come for them. I think it may be a situation where Camden is maybe a year away, but this is a really intriguing squad. And the small school ranks there, I think, kind of get overshadowed by the big schools, and you can even include teams like Newton and West Orange Stark in that. But I think that it's very healthy right now, kind of the level of small school play down there in the Golden Triangle.
I'll tell you, one of the ones I'm interested to talk about too is the Woodville Eagles, and of course the steps over the last couple of years to kind of reboot that program again too, get some kids to kind of buy into that culture down there up there in Woodville at Piney Woods. I love it so much. Great football team. They give you great effort no matter. They got a great non-district schedule too, and of course that district's tough too. Expectations, give me those for the Woodville Eagles.
Yeah, it's obviously coming off of that state championship game run a year ago, in their first title game appearance in program history. Kind of expectations are high. Now it's kind of a reset though, because in a couple of ways. One, they get hammered by graduation. They lose, I believe, 15 starters off of last year's team, including Tavian Hunter, who was their all everything, Mr. Do It All for them. They have some holes to fill. They're also obviously having to replace Ty Robinson. Going to take over at the head coach at Crawford. They bring in a guy who's got big school experience in Heath Clausen, coming in from Elgin there in the greater Houston area, or greater Austin area. This is, I think that they are a team that obviously last year they got hot. What I want to see is, are they able to sustain this? Are they able to go and take a team that obviously was feeling exceptionally, feeling like they could beat anybody? Can they bottle that and kind of continue that momentum? They probably look like, in my opinion, the chief challenger to Newton in District 12. But remember, Woodville didn't win the district championship last year. That was Newton. But there was only one of those teams that was at AT&T Stadium. I know which one I would rather be. So if you're Woodville, I think that early on you may take some lumps. I want to see what they look like as the season progresses, because there are going to be a number of young players who are asked to step up in a big way.
It's going to be a lot of fun there too as well. And I tell you what, man, switching gears a little bit to the college ranks too. Of course, the big one this weekend, Texas, Ohio State, Arch Manning taking over there. It's kind of that full-time starter now too, and getting under there. For just a lot of reasons there, to not have any more worries, to kind of be the best backup in college football too. But you look at the Aggies, and of course that just powerhouse of the Southeastern Conference with the Aggies, and of course the Texas Longhorns, big rivalry rekindled last year. Talk about just the SEC and the powerhouse expectations for America's number one ranked team, that being the Texas Longhorns, and then what you expect from well coached, great football team of the Texas A&M Aggies.
Yeah, for Texas, I think that it's understandably, at the very least, championship game or bust for them. I think that if they were to fall anything short of playing for a national championship, it would be considered a real missed opportunity. And Arch Manning, there's no, obviously in the limited time we've seen him, he has been impressive. There is nothing we've seen that makes us think that he can't be the guy to get Texas over the hump. But I also think that their defense, led by Anthony Hill and Colin Simmons, has an opportunity to be really good, and they can run the ball, I think, as well. And that is one thing I'm very intrigued to see against this Ohio State team. I want to see in their opener, we'll obviously learn a lot going on the road. How well does Arch Manning handle it? And more importantly, can Texas's offensive line, which does look to be a strength, can they keep Arch Manning clean? I think that's going to be a really important part of that game in Columbus, and obviously it could really light a firework under the Texas hype train if they were to go to the Horseshoe and get a win. For A&M, this is a really intriguing team, especially I think in the running game. Le'Veon Moss could be, in fact, the best running back in in the SEC this year. I know there's a lot of expectations around him. There's two areas of concern that I have. Well, concerns may be too strong, but there's two things that I'm very much watching for the Aggies. One of them is the linebacker core. I think their linebacker core has some outside of Torrey and York. They've got some holes to fill, and I'm interested to see how they do that. The other thing is going to be quarterback Marcel Reed. Last year it was kind of is he in, is he out type situation, kind of with Connor Wegman, who started the year as the starter. Through injuries and ineffectiveness, he kind of got replaced by Marcel Reed. Marcel Reed looked good at times, looked like a backup at other times. I think this year is a referendum on Colin Klein, the offensive coordinator for Texas A&M, as well as their quarterback Marcel Reed. If you're a believer in Marcel Reed and Colin Klein, then I think A&M is a college football playoff contender. If you're not, then the floor is maybe 7-5, 6-6 for this team. I think a lot of it comes back to QB1 and their offensive coordinator putting them in a position to win. Because one of the things I think is so fascinating is that I think there's actually a pretty decent comp for what Marcel Reed can look like, and it's the guy who's calling his plays. Colin Klein, when he was at Kansas State, Marcel Reed has a kind of a similar skill set there. And so I'm intrigued to see how Colin Klein and company deploy Marcel Reed in a way to put them in the best position to succeed.
It's going to be a fun season, no doubt. 2025 football is here. Greg Tepper, Dave Campbell's Football Magazine. Go check them out there, davecampbells.com. Get your digital subscription and the hard copy across all the bookstores out there available too as well. Greg, always appreciate the time. When you come around and I contact you, it's football season, and hopefully all the teams stay healthy this year too, and good luck to all the Texas teams out there. Appreciate the time, the knowledge, and brother, we get to do this again at some point, hopefully this year, and best of luck with your games out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it, guys, and looking forward to seeing some good football down there in Southeast Texas.
Be a lot of fun. Greg Tepper out there, too. Again, thanks to all the sponsors. For Hampshire Finette out there, we're back here at the sportsguyspodcast.com. More to come here on our preview show live at Guitar Center, Beaumont, Texas. Stay tuned.
Hey, y'all. This is Nashville recording artist Sunny Sweeney, and you're listening to the best in music and sports, the award-nominated Backstage Pass podcast on KYBN 98.1, your Bay Area Broadcasting Network. Stream anytime on the sportsguyspodcast.com and on thwn.org. You can also listen anytime on iHeartRadio podcast.
What's up, y'all? This is Nashville recording artist Brooke Eden, and you're listening to the award-nominated Backstage Pass on KYBN 98.1, your Bay Area Broadcasting Network. Listen anytime on iHeart Podcasts and at the sportsguyspodcast.com and on thwn.org.